My name is Sarah, and I'm 34 years old. 6 months ago, I was living in my childhood home with my 3 kids. Today, I'm sitting in my own kitchen, in my own house, watching my children play in our backyard. The journey between those 2 moments changed everything I thought I knew about family. I never imagined that the words, "just get out," would become the catalyst for the best decision I ever made. But sometimes, life has a way of pushing you toward the very thing you need most, even when it comes wrapped in pain and rejection. Growing up, I was taught that family comes first. Always. No matter what they do to you, no matter how they treat you, you stick by them. You forgive. You endure. You make excuses for their behavior because that's what good daughters do. That belief nearly destroyed me. The morning everything changed started like any other. My kids were getting ready for school. 8-year-old Emma was struggling with her math homework at the kitchen table. 5-year-old Marcus was arguing about wearing his jacket. Baby Lily was fussing in her high chair, throwing Cheerios on the floor. I was juggling breakfast, lunch preparations, and trying to find Emma's missing library book. The chaos was familiar. Overwhelming, but familiar. What I didn't know was that this ordinary Tuesday would become the day I finally found my voice. My mother walked into the kitchen wearing that expression. The one that meant she'd been lying awake all night, cataloging my failures as a daughter and a mother. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. "We need to talk," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I felt my stomach drop. In our family, "we need to talk" never meant anything good. It meant judgment was coming. Criticism disguised as concern. Love with so many conditions attached that it barely qualified as love at all. My father appeared in the doorway, his massive frame filling the space. He didn't say anything, but his presence felt heavy, oppressive, like storm clouds gathering before a hurricane. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. "Sarah, we've been patient with you," my mother began, her voice taking on that condescending tone I'd heard my entire life. "But this situation has gone on long enough." I knew what situation she meant. The fact that I was a single mother, living in their house with my 3 children. The fact that I'd left my abusive ex-husband 2 years earlier and hadn't bounced back fast enough for their liking. "You're 34 years old," she continued, as if I'd somehow forgotten my age. "You have 3 children to support, and instead of figuring out your life, you're moping around here like a teenager." The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. This was the woman who told me she loved me every night before bed when I was little. The same woman who taught me to bake cookies and braid my hair. My father stepped forward, his voice booming through the small kitchen. "Your mother's right. You've been taking advantage of our generosity for too long. We raised you to be independent, not to be a burden." A burden. That single word shattered something inside me that I didn't even know was whole. Emma looked up from her homework, confusion clouding her young face. Marcus had stopped arguing about his jacket and was staring at his grandparents with wide eyes. Even baby Lily had gone quiet, sensing the tension that filled the room like toxic smoke. "I work 2 jobs," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I pay rent. I buy groceries. I help with utilities." My mother laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Working at a coffee shop and babysitting hardly counts as real employment, Sarah. When are you going to grow up and get a real job?" When are you going to stop using your children as an excuse for your failures? That's when something inside me cracked. Not broke entirely, but cracked enough to let light in. Enough to let me see clearly for the first time in years. The woman standing in front of me criticizing my life choices while my children watched wasn't protecting me. She wasn't helping me grow stronger. She was keeping me small, keeping me dependent, keeping me grateful for scraps of conditional love. Have you ever had a moment where you suddenly saw your entire life from a different angle? Where everything you thought was true shifted just enough to reveal a completely different picture? That morning, standing in my childhood kitchen with my children watching their mother be torn down piece by piece, I finally understood what I'd been too afraid to see. To understand why that morning hit me so hard, you need to know how I got there. How a confident young woman became someone who apologized for taking up space in her own life. I grew up in this house, the middle child between my older brother David and younger sister Rachel. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Dad worked construction, Mom stayed home with us kids. We had family dinners every night, went to church on Sundays, took vacations to the beach every summer. But inside these walls, perfection came with a price. My parents' love was a reward system. Good grades earned hugs. Bad behavior meant silent treatment. Obedience brought praise. Questions brought lectures about respect and gratitude. David figured out the game early. He became the golden child, the son who could do no wrong. Star athlete, good grades, popular with teachers and friends. He learned to tell my parents exactly what they wanted to hear, and in return, he got unconditional support for everything he did. Rachel took a different approach. She rebelled hard and early. Piercings, tattoos, staying out all night. She fought with our parents constantly, but somehow her defiance earned their respect. They saw her as strong-willed, independent, a fighter. Me? I tried to be the peacemaker, the good daughter who smoothed over conflicts and made everyone happy. I thought if I was helpful enough, quiet enough, grateful enough, I'd earn the same unconditional love they gave my siblings. I was wrong. When I married Tom at 23, my parents were thrilled. He was everything they wanted for me. Stable job, nice family, charming personality. What they didn't see was how he controlled every aspect of my life. How he isolated me from friends. How he made me believe that his anger was my fault. The first time he hit me, I told myself it was an accident. The second time, I made excuses. By the third time, I'd learned to hide the bruises and pretend everything was fine. Just like I'd learned to hide my feelings as a child. My parents loved Tom. He knew exactly how to charm them, just like David had. He brought flowers for Mom, talked sports with Dad, played the devoted husband perfectly. When I finally worked up the courage to tell them what was really happening, they didn't believe me. "Marriage takes work, Sarah," my mother said, patting my hand like I was a child having a tantrum. "Tom loves you. He provides for you. Don't throw away a good marriage because you're going through a rough patch." My father was more direct. "Maybe if you tried harder to make him happy, he wouldn't get so frustrated. Men need respect, Sarah. They need to feel like the head of their household." So I tried harder. I walked on eggshells. I made his favorite meals, kept the house spotless, never complained when he came home drunk. I had Emma, thinking a baby would fix things. Then Marcus, hoping a son would calm his anger. Each child became another chain binding me to a man who saw me as property. The breaking point came when Tom raised his hand to Emma. She was 3 years old, crying because she'd spilled juice on his newspaper. I saw his fist clench, saw the rage in his eyes, and something primal took over. I stepped between them, took the hit meant for my daughter, and in that moment, I knew I was done. I left that night with my 2 kids and the clothes on our backs. Pregnant with Lily, broke, and terrified, I showed up at my parents' doorstep begging for help. They took us in, but not without conditions. I had to promise to try counseling with Tom. I had to agree not to file for divorce immediately. I had to accept that maybe I was partially to blame for the marriage falling apart. For 2 years, I lived under their roof, grateful but shrinking a little more each day. They helped with the kids, yes, but every kindness came with a reminder of how much I owed them. Every mistake was proof that I couldn't handle life on my own. David visited every few months with his picture-perfect wife and 2 well-behaved children. My parents praised his success constantly. His big house, his new car, his wife's promotion at work. He was everything I wasn't. Independent, successful, settled. Rachel lived 3 states away and called once a month. She'd escaped our family's gravitational pull through pure force of will, but the distance came at a cost. She was successful but isolated, strong but alone. And me? I was stuck in limbo. Not independent enough to earn respect, not rebellious enough to be left alone. Just grateful enough to be tolerated. Until that morning when tolerance ran out and the truth finally surfaced. The weeks following that kitchen confrontation were a blur of late-night planning and quiet desperation. My parents had made their position clear. I needed to either get my life together quickly or find somewhere else to live. The unspoken deadline hung over everything like a storm cloud. I threw myself into finding solutions, applied for better jobs, looked into affordable apartments, reached out to old friends who might have couch space. But every door seemed to slam shut before I could even get my foot in it. The coffee shop where I worked barely paid enough to cover my share of expenses at my parents' house. The babysitting brought in extra cash, but it wasn't steady. Apartment complexes wanted first and last month's rent plus deposits I couldn't dream of affording. Potential employers saw my resume gaps and single motherhood as red flags. Meanwhile, my parents' passive-aggressive comments became a daily soundtrack. "Still no luck with apartments?" my mother would ask sweetly over breakfast, while Emma pretended not to notice the tension. "Maybe you should consider moving to a smaller town where rent is cheaper," my father would suggest, fully aware that I couldn't afford to move anywhere at all. The worst part was watching my children navigate this minefield of adult dysfunction. Emma, my sensitive oldest, started having nightmares. She'd wake up crying, asking if we were going to be homeless. Marcus became clingy and defiant, acting out at school in ways that earned calls from his teacher. Baby Lily seemed to absorb the stress through the air itself, becoming fussy and difficult to soothe. I felt like I was failing them every single day. Then David came to visit with his family for Mom's birthday. Watching my parents fawn over his children while barely tolerating mine was like watching a masterclass in conditional love. His daughter, Sophie, who was Emma's age, got praised for every little thing. His son Jake could do no wrong. During dinner, David made an offhand comment that changed everything. He was talking about his recent promotion and mentioned how his company was hiring remote workers for data entry positions. The pay was decent, the hours were flexible, and you could work from anywhere with reliable internet. "I could put in a good word for you, Sarah," he said, not looking up from his plate. "If you're serious about getting your life together." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, but I swallowed my pride. This could be the opportunity I needed. A real job with steady income and flexible hours that would let me care for my kids. That night, I filled out the application. 3 days later, I had a phone interview. A week after that, I got the job. The salary was more than I'd ever made in my life. Not enough to live luxuriously, but enough to actually support my family independently. The relief was overwhelming, but it came with an unexpected realization. I'd been so focused on finding a way to stay in town, near my family, that I'd never considered other options. But now, with remote work, I could live anywhere. I started researching quietly, looking at rental prices in different cities, different states. What I found amazed me. In some places, I could rent a whole house for less than a tiny apartment would cost locally. More than that, I could buy a house. With FEE, my new steady income and first-time homebuyer programs, homeownership was actually possible. The idea felt revolutionary and terrifying all at once. I called a real estate agent in a mid-sized city 3 hours away. The market was hot, she said, but there were still opportunities for buyers in my price range. She scheduled virtual tours for the following week. Sitting in my childhood bedroom, laptop balanced on my knees while my kids slept around me, I toured houses through a computer screen. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, fenced backyards, quiet neighborhoods with good schools. Houses where Emma could have her own room, where Marcus could play without constantly being shooshed, where Lily could crawl around freely. Have you ever felt the exact moment when possibility shifted from dream to plan? That's what happened as I clicked through listing after listing. Each house represented more than just a place to live. It represented freedom, independence, a chance to build the life I wanted instead of the one I'd settled for. The hardest part was keeping it secret. My parents would have 1,000 reasons why it was a bad idea. Too far from family support, too expensive, too risky for a single mother. They'd worry me out of even trying, convince me I was being irresponsible and selfish. So I kept quiet and kept planning. Made spreadsheets of expenses, researched schools, looked up activities for the kids. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving toward something instead of just surviving each day. The future was starting to look like something I could actually build. The morning I planned to tell my parents about the house I'd put an offer on, Rachel called with news that changed everything. She was getting married, a small ceremony, just family, in 6 weeks. She wanted the kids and me to be there. I can't afford to travel right now, I told her, pacing in the backyard while the kids played inside. I'll pay for your flights, Rachel said immediately. Sarah, I want you there. I need you there. It's important to me. Her generosity brought tears to my eyes, but it also highlighted something painful. My sister, who lived states away and called once a month, was offering more support than the parents I lived with every day. When I hung up and went inside, to share the news, my parents' reaction was immediate and harsh. She can't just expect us to drop everything and fly across the country, my mother said, as if Rachel had personally inconvenienced her. 6 weeks' notice for a wedding? That's barely enough time to plan. My father was more direct. How are you planning to pay for this trip, Sarah? Because we're not funding your vacation while you're already behind on contributing to household expenses. I'm not behind on anything, I said quietly, and Rachel is paying for our flights. My mother's expression soured. Oh, how nice. Rachel swoops in with her money and makes grand gestures while we're here doing the real work of helping you get back on your feet. That's when I realized they weren't upset about the logistics of travel. They were upset that someone else was helping me, that someone else was showing me kindness without strings attached. We've been supporting you for 2 years, my father continued, his voice rising. And instead of showing gratitude, you're planning trips and acting like we owe you something. Emma appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension in adult voices. She looked small and worried, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. Go play in your room, sweetheart, I said gently, but she hesitated. Are you fighting about Aunt Rachel's wedding? She asked, her 8-year-old voice cutting through the adult drama with startling clarity. My mother's face softened slightly, when she looked at Emma. "We're just discussing travel plans, honey. Adult stuff." But Emma wasn't fooled. "Why don't you want us to go see Aunt Rachel get married? Weddings are happy." The innocence of her question hung in the air like an accusation. Why were we turning a happy family event into another source of conflict and stress? That's when I made the decision that changed everything. "We're going to the wedding," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And when we come back, we won't be coming back here." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's eyes went wide. My parents looked like I'd slapped them. "What are you talking about?" my mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath and found strength I didn't know I had. "I got a job. A real job with real benefits and steady pay. I've been looking at houses, and I found one. We put in an offer yesterday, and it was accepted this morning." My father's face turned red. "You did what? Without discussing it with us? Without asking our opinion?" "I'm 34 years old," I said, echoing my mother's words from weeks earlier. "I don't need permission to make decisions about my own life." "This is insane," my mother said, standing up and starting to pace. "You can't just buy a house. You don't know anything about home ownership, about maintenance, about property. Taxes. You'll be in over your head within months." "Where is this house?" my father demanded. "How far away are you planning to take our grandchildren?" The possessiveness in his voice, "our grandchildren," made something click into place. This wasn't about concern for my well-being or the kids' best interests. This was about control, about keeping me close enough to manage, dependent enough to manipulate. 3 hours away, I said. Close enough to visit, far enough to breathe. My mother stopped pacing and stared at me. "Sarah, be reasonable. You're making an emotional decision because you're upset. This is exactly the kind of impulsive behavior that got you into trouble with Tom." The comparison to my abusive ex-husband was the final straw. That she would use my past trauma to manipulate me into staying small, staying dependent, staying grateful for scraps of conditional love. "No," I said, louder than I'd spoken in their house in years. What got me in trouble with Tom was listening to people who told me to stay quiet, be grateful, and put everyone else's comfort before my own safety and happiness. Emma had retreated to the hallway, but she was still listening. Marcus appeared beside her, sensing the shift in energy. If you've ever been in a moment where you knew there was no going back, you'll understand what I felt standing in that kitchen. The old Sarah would have apologized, backed down, found ways to make peace. But that Sarah had died the morning they called me a burden in front of my children. The new Sarah had found her voice, and she wasn't going to be silenced anymore. The next 6 weeks were the longest and shortest of my life. Long because every day felt like walking on eggshells while living with parents who viewed my independence as a personal betrayal. Short because there was so much to do, packing, coordinating the move, preparing the kids for a new life. My parents stopped speaking to me directly. Instead, they communicated through pointed comments and dramatic sighs. My mother would clean around my things as if they were contaminating the house. My father would make loud phone calls about ungrateful children where I could clearly hear every word. The hardest part was protecting my kids from the toxic atmosphere while trying to help them process the upcoming changes. Emma was excited about having her own room, but worried about leaving her friends. Marcus didn't fully understand why we were moving, but picked up on the adult tension and became more clingy than ever. David called 3 days before we left. His voice was tight with disapproval, but he tried to sound reasonable. "Sarah, I think you're making a mistake," he said. "Mom and Dad aren't perfect, but they've been helping you. Family sticks together through hard times." This is me sticking together with my family, I replied. My kids. They're my priority. Now. The conversation ended badly, with David accusing me of being selfish, and me pointing out that he'd never offered help beyond getting me the job that made this move possible. Rachel's wedding was beautiful and small, held in a garden behind the bed and breakfast where she and her fiancé were staying. My kids were the only children there, and they were absolutely spoiled with attention from Rachel's friends and her future in-laws. Watching my sister get married, seeing how her fiancé looked at her with pure adoration and respect, made me realize what a healthy relationship actually looked like. No walking on eggshells, no conditional love, just two people who chose each other every day. I'm proud of you for making this move, Rachel told me during the reception, while we watched our kids dance with the wedding party. It takes courage to change your life. I'm terrified, I admitted. Good, she said, squeezing my hand. That means it matters. 2 days later, we were in our new house. The moving truck had arrived that morning, and by evening, we were surrounded by boxes in a place that was completely ours. The first night was rough. Emma cried because her room felt too big and empty. Marcus kept asking when we were going home. Lily was cranky from all the changes. I sat on the floor of our new living room, holding my baby while my older kids snuggled against me, and wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. But then Emma said something that made everything worth it. Mama, why does this house feel so quiet? I realized she was right. There was no underlying tension, no criticism floating through the air, no need to constantly monitor everyone's moods to avoid conflict. The quiet wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Because it's ours, I told her. We don't have to walk on eggshells here. We don't have to worry about making anyone angry just by existing. 1 year later, I'm sitting in that same living room, but it looks completely different. The walls are painted in colors we chose together. Emma picked purple for her room. Marcus wanted dinosaur decals in his. Family photos cover the mantle, but they're photos of us, happy and relaxed. The kids have thrived in ways I never expected. Emma joined the school choir and made friends who come over for sleepovers. Marcus started soccer and discovered he loves running. Lily took her first steps in our kitchen, clapping as she wobbled, between the counter and my arms. I've thrived too. The remote work has led to a promotion and even better benefits. I've made friends with other parents at school events. I've started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it feels good to remember that I'm worth pursuing, worth treating with respect. My parents and I talk now, but the relationship is different. I set boundaries and stick to them. Phone calls have time limits. Visits are planned in advance and end when I say they end. They're learning to respect my choices, even if they don't understand them. Have you ever made a decision that scared you but turned out to be exactly what you needed? Sometimes the thing that feels like falling apart is actually falling together. Sometimes what looks like loss is actually the beginning of finding yourself. David still thinks I made a mistake, but Rachel visits regularly and tells me how proud she is of the life I've built. Most importantly, my children are learning that love doesn't come with conditions, that they don't have to shrink themselves to earn affection, that they deserve respect and kindness just for being who they are. If you've made it this far in my story, I want you to know that you're exactly the kind of person I was hoping would hear this. Maybe you're in a situation where family love feels more like a prison than a gift. Maybe you're being told that wanting better for yourself is selfish or ungrateful. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago. You are allowed to outgrow relationships that keep you small. You are allowed to choose peace over people-pleasing. You are allowed to build a life that makes you proud, even if it disappoints people who benefited from your struggles. The house we live in now isn't fancy. It's a modest 3-bedroom with a small yard and a mortgage that stretches my budget some months. But it's ours. When Emma practices piano, she doesn't have to stop because it's bothering anyone. When Marcus wants to build elaborate Lego cities in the living room, he can leave them up for days. When Lily laughs her belly laugh, no one shushes her. This morning, I woke up to the sound of my children playing together in Emma's room. Not the worried whispers they used to use at my parents' house, but actual joyful noise. Emma was reading Marcus a story while Lily babbled along from her crib. The sound was chaos and music all at once. I made coffee in my own kitchen, in my favorite mug that nobody complains about taking up cupboard space. I sat in my living room, watching morning light filter through windows we decorated together. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years: contentment. Not happiness exactly, because life is still hard sometimes. Single parenthood is exhausting. Work can be stressful. The house needs repairs. I'm learning to handle myself. But contentment? That deep sense that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do. My relationship with my parents is still complicated. They've softened somewhat over the past year, especially after seeing how well the kids are doing, but they still make comments about how far away we live, how we should visit more often, how I'm depriving them of time with their grandchildren. The difference is that their disappointment doesn't control my decisions anymore. I can love them and still protect my own peace. I can appreciate what they did right while refusing to accept what they did wrong. I can be grateful for their help during those difficult years while also acknowledging that staying would have slowly killed the person I was meant to become. Last month, Emma asked me if I missed living with Grandma and Grandpa. I thought about it seriously before answering. I miss some things, I told her honestly. I miss having help when you're all sick. I miss having someone else cook dinner sometimes. But I don't miss feeling like I had to apologize for existing. She nodded like that made perfect sense to her 8-year-old brain. I like our house better, she said. It feels like us. That's exactly what I wanted to give my children. A home that feels like us. A place where their personalities can unfold without being criticized or constrained. A place where love is given freely, not earned through good behavior and gratitude. If you're watching this and thinking about your own situation, I want to ask you a few questions. Have you ever felt like you had to earn love through perfect behavior? Do you walk on eggshells around family members who claim to care about you? Do you make yourself smaller to avoid conflict with people who should be lifting you up? Those feelings aren't signs of weakness or ingratitude. They're signs that something in those relationships needs to change. Either the relationships need to evolve, or you need to evolve beyond them. I'm not saying everyone should buy a house and move 3 hours away from family. That solution worked for my specific situation, but every story is different. What I am saying is that you deserve relationships that feel like home, safe, accepting, nurturing places where you can be fully yourself. Take a moment right now to think about the people in your life who make you feel lighter versus the ones who make you feel heavier. The ones who celebrate your growth versus the ones who prefer you dependent. The ones who love you as you are versus the ones who love you for what you do for them. Your life is not a rough draft. You don't have to accept relationships that drain your energy and dim your light just because they come with the label of family. Blood relation doesn't automatically equal healthy love. If my story resonated with you, please leave a comment sharing where you are in your own journey. Are you still in the eggshell walking phase, or have you found your voice? Have you made hard choices that led to better outcomes? Your story matters, and sharing it might help someone else find their courage. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories about choosing yourself, setting boundaries, and building the life you actually want. And remember, you are allowed to want more. You are allowed to do what it takes to get it.